Hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with No Problem. Today, we are heading towards the Lost Woods after completing what I personally can complete of the Death Mountain Shrines, at least at this current moment. See, Death Mountain, while it has a bit of a notorious streak for it, being a harder region than average to traverse, what with your initial run up the mountain literally being on fire in most players' cases, to the shrines themselves being harder than average to really get a grasp of what pathway to take and how best to go about it. I opted for attempting everything as I am first. But the big kicker is that a lot of the shrines in the Death Mountain region require, at least in this particular run, wind bombs. Now, theoretically, each of these shrines would be more than doable. A bow here, a stasis rock, and a hammer later, and most of these shrines would be completed. In fact, the entire main quest at the moment is being held back by just my capability or lack thereof to using hammers and other weapons right now. So there is definitely a lot in Death Mountain that can't be done that I was hoping to see completed. But why are we still here? I said we're heading to Faerun, right? And the reason is that we are actually focusing more so on getting Dinral's scale. So there are 3 shrines throughout all of Hyrule. One of courage, one of power, one of wisdom. And the Shrine of Power, which is in the Akala region, is the only shrine that I was unable to even enter thus far, due to it requiring that you find, track down, and land a single strike on Dinral, the fire dragon to the north end of the Death Mountain region in and of itself. This is all well and good. So, given that Dinral has actually spawned in for the first time in what would be an in-game week, I'm taking the opportunity while it's here. Well, mostly. So, yeah. My biggest concern is that I admit that I haven't tested any of this prior. A lot of what I'm doing, I am making up and trying to figure out on the fly, using this as a test dummy of sorts, seeing how each section is actually affected by not being able to use weapons. It seems so simplistic in a way. The game is designed around giving the player as much freedom as one could ever imagine, as one could ever want in this type of game. And by taking away some of that freedom, some of the choices and solutions to problems, unfortunately, a lot of rather easy to solve problems become a tad bit more concerning. Now, oh, I did? Wait, did it actually do it? It did too. Okay, so I just gotta figure out where it lands, I guess. Oh, I think I saw it there, just in the a little bit further forward. Yeah, the second one isn't working. And Dinral is disappearing. Oh, there's the scale. Perfect. With Dinral's scale in hand, we head over to the north end of Akala. Specifically, the Zunakai Shrine on Skull Lake. We'll take a little bit of a detour and finish this up. Now, depending on what type of shrine it is, I'll be completing it right here, right now, or I might be leaving it for later depending on the gear and tools necessary to accomplish the task. An example would be like the test of strength shrines. Thus far, every minor test has been completed, at least every one I've come across. But moderate and major tests, just too much and too resource intensive to complete at this time. It's not to say that it's a forever thing. I know it's completable without more traditional weapons, shall we say. But it is something that they get smarter with each iteration of the test of strength shrines, for example, where a bomb where you can beat the minor test of strength with bombs, no problem. But the moderate and major ones become wary of bombs and actually will shoot them out of your hands, for example, effectively getting 2 hits for the price of 1. This becomes one of the major stopping points that I have, just on the basis of I know it's possible, I just don't know how to make it possible. With that said, the shrine should be right up over this ridge here, theoretically. No, yep, there it is. So we just take the scale out of our pack, drop it in the water, and probably a blessing shrine if I'm being honest. I don't think there would be a extensive challenge behind trying to track down and land a single strike on a dragon. But I suppose stranger things have happened. Alright. Puzzle complete. So, come on game. There we go. Dinral's scale disappears with its individual use. And Tutsuwa Nima Shrine. No. No, this is not a thing that's happening right now. So, I'm gonna instead go to the Namaka Oz Shrine, which is in the north end of Central Hyrule. And we're gonna head towards the tower to the north, as well as continue through the Lost Woods, with the expectation that at least something is going to be possible. Yeah, I forgot there was a shrine on the other side of the river here. Let's get that too while we're on our way. So, with Death Mountain's shrines, specifically needing the bow, there's a few shrines that I know are possible without. The Balancing Act shrine, if I were able to bring a weapon in, the very simple solution would be to burn something, or would effectively be to burn a piece of wood to lower the scales, and effectively allow access to higher regions of the area without much of a concern. These solutions are abundantly apparent right from the word go. There's nothing stopping you from going and doing it in most playthroughs. Now there are 3 solutions. Typically, either you'll take a bomb arrow, a fire arrow, or, dare I say, a magnesis object like a sword, and knock stuff around to change the scale weights. This is perfectly fine and doable. But once you get into some of the other solutions, like having to knock fire down, I currently have nothing that can make fire in my arsenal except for chew jellies. And the only way to activate chew jellies is to get really lucky with the throw, or to blow them up with a bomb. And neither of those really sound very optimal in my mind. Now, I have seen this shrine done in incredibly ridiculous ways. So, the Miro Shah's shrine, if you were to look up Game Champ 3000's run of Zelda Breath of the Wild without pausing, you would see that Game Champ ends up using the, magnesis to its absolute most ridiculous. By throwing the bomb in a corner just so, the ball in the corner just so, they ended up getting the ball over the railing and then proceeded to use a giant boomerang to move the ball from underwater onto the platform itself. Now, the solution, while it is reasonable, is not exactly the most doable. At least, not for me. For one, I require the use of the... I don't have weapons to be able to magnesis control to make it happen. So, while magnesis would be a very viable and usable option, there really isn't that much for me to be able to... Where did the ball... I hit the switch. While magnesis would work, there's just too much room for error for me personally and my general lack of patience to make happen. Okay, that one was closer to going over the railing. Theoretically, in my head, if I could get the ball over the railing, then I'd be fine. But then again, I really don't have a whole lot of options. There are 3 potential solutions that I can see at this moment in time. Now, about 3 days after I've recorded this. The first is that I need to make more liberal use of Cryonis by allowing myself to have what I'll call hit stops. It will allow the ball to bounce and make it further, but these pit stops are kind of not going to do enough for the average run. Now, theoretically, if this were Game Champ's run, where glitches and other options were available, theoretically she would just jump over the railing here and off we go. And in my I'm just trying to figure stuff out mentality, I also did the same, opting instead of trying to jump over the railing, trying to jump through the grate. Either option could work, but I am not smart. Just a good jump here and yep, there we go. Unfortunately, I can't get much higher than this. And so, it is with a heavy heart that I have to once again say that it's another shrine that is currently uncompletable. So, teleport out of there, and we're gonna head towards the military base to the north. Now, the military base is another lovely location. Typically, it was used as a boot camp of sorts. Think training grounds. In Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, they actually have it shown as a region that actively can train up your warriors at a moment's notice, provided you have the rupees for it. But By the time of Breath of the Wild, now a century later, its original purpose has all but been lost to time. The walls that once acted as battlements and defenses now toppled and destroyed. Their watchtowers now covered in monsters like Lizalfos or even moblins. The military base, for all intents and purposes, is still a military base, but not for the Hylian militia. It is now for none other than moblins, lizards, and everything in between. Now, this particular tower, actually has a fair bit going for it in terms of uniqueness. Some towers you just climb from the base or you burn something to get up it. This one has barrels that attack you, like in Dark Souls. But you end up with circumstances left, right, and center where the entire camp itself almost seems to be against you. Or against that poor guy. I don't know if he even got up from that. But we got pools of, effectively, mud. A bottomless bog or a mire below it now. What caused the mire? Who knows? But at this point, you are effectively stuck to following the battlements as they should have been used all those years ago to reach the central location of the tower. The central location of the tower just so happens to coincide with the center of the military base and, by extension, your map of this entire region of Northern Hyrule. I think I said Faerun earlier. Faerun is actually to the south, if my memory serves accurately. Ow. Stop hitting me with the rocks, or whatever those are. You know what happens when you get hit by a rock? This is what happens when you get rocked. See? Not fun. Anywho. There are a couple of minor problems that need to be addressed. The first and foremost being that I've got to effectively get to the center of the mud puddle. And the second being that I have to climb said tower. The tower, as I've said, are guarded by moblins, lizards, and everything in between. But there's a little known side fact about this area that kinda sucks. And this little known side fact is that if you fall in the water, you sink to the bottom. And lose half a heart after Lakitu decides to pick you up and set you back. All seriousness, no, we have a medial whiz rope waiting in this area. Now, for those that know what a medial whiz rope is, great. Those that don't, effectively, think the fire whiz ropes. Fireballs, whatnot, throw it at you and off you go, you're on fire. Really great. Medial whiz ropes are an evolution of the fire whiz rope. Effectively, instead of firing a singular fireball, they heat up the surrounding air and area to such a degree that it rivals the Gerudo Valley. And then, to make matters even worse, they also opt to to drop fireballs of varying sizes on Link's head. Effectively, you're on fire and also on fire. It's a really great combination. And realizing now that I probably could have just used Cryonis to save myself from falling in the mire so often. But I got myself so attached to the big block, I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, oh well. That's the joys of hindsight. Always 20/20. While you watch me flop around and attempt to get from one end of this swamp to the other, I figure now's as good a time as any to talk about the Lost Woods. And the Lost Woods is one of those regions that is pretty well tied with Zelda as a whole. It has existed in virtually every Hyrule-based Zelda since The Legend of Zelda back in the 80s. Now, its original iteration was just a single tile that repeated itself numerous times until you went back the way you came. But there's so much more to it. And in the lore of the game as a whole, there are, I suppose, kind of two different versions of the Lost Woods depending on which version you're thinking of or looking at. Lost Woods has always been a dangerous location. It's always been one of those locations that you're expecting to go to, but you never really look forward to. And in each iteration that it shows up, there's a different way to get into the core of the Lost Woods, which is housing some major artifact or location that is necessary for the completion of the game under normal circumstances. In the original Zelda, it was housing, I believe, it was one of the temples. Or at least the temple was nearby the Lost Woods. You could theoretically get through it without too much of an issue, but you couldn't really do much with that. The second, if you look at Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, you had a region that constantly kind of pushed you to go in and out of, I believe it was a temple, although I could be thinking of Skull Woods. Ocarina of Time's version of it was effectively that you had to use your other senses to find your way around. Now, I won't lie, this is probably the iteration that I'm most familiar with, and the one that I think did it probably the best. See, with some games, some regions, you end up in this circumstance where you need to be able to progress, and progression is not always linear. In the Lost Woods of Ocarina of Time, there were locations that you could go off the beaten path, or the expected or intended path, to find secrets within the Lost Woods, provided you are paying enough attention to go to certain checkpoints throughout. So, for example, when first entering the Lost Woods from the Kokiri Forest, you take a left instead of the intended right. You will go around, you'll talk to a couple of Skull Kids, and also find a region that takes you nearby the bridge that you pass through on your way out of the Kokiri Forest in the main pathway of the game. The second, of course, there are others such as hidden shops. There are different regions throughout the entire Lost Woods area that showcase that there was more intended for the region, or at least that the region was always intended to have a secret or two tied to it. Breath of the Wild is no different. The Breath of the Wild version of it is one that I actually look at as being one of the more quote-unquote complete versions of the Lost Woods run. Ocarina of Time had you searching for sound. Twilight Princess had you also listening for sound, specifically waiting and trying to find the Skull Kid, who was playing away on his trumpet as he do. And the point of the finding the Skull Kid was that you were intending to find him and deal damage to him for him to open up a hidden pathway. This hidden pathway system is once again shared in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and To my recollection, I believe the hidden pathway system also exists in, I believe it's a Link Between Worlds. Although I admit I've only played through the game once, so bear with me on if I got that piece wrong. But the two I want to talk about that I think are most intriguing are the um, Breath of the Wild version and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, in Breath of the Wild, you enter through actually exactly where we are, and you are greeted with a singular torch. As you see, the torch in front of me has sparks leading to the right, showcasing that there is air movement in the area. Follow the sparks, and you will effectively be shown the way through the woods. Now, sparks are the most easily recognizable source to pay attention to find your way through the woods. But they're not the only way. As you can see, there are the little white flakies. They also show the way through the Lost Woods, meaning that you're not totally out to lunch if you get lost in here. But the third option is honestly by far the hardest to get through the woods. It is simply just watching, paying attention to your surroundings as you're wandering through this area. Because lo and behold, the game gives you a fraction of a second to backpedal and say, oops, I made a mistake. So when I entered the Lost Woods here, I came here with the expectation that it would be incredibly difficult to get through the Lost Woods in its entirety because I was effectively trying to do this wrong. I wasn't paying attention to the white glittery guys that are moving through the air right now. Oh, what do you know? Those don't work. Okay, so there's only two options. Effectively, trial by fire, or trial by smoke. And this is a perfectly reasonable way of going about it. But as you can see, as I got close to the out-of-bounds region, the smoke begins to come flying in at Link, and you have a fraction of a second to react, or you have about a second to react and go back to a safe zone. If you are rushing through the Lost Woods, you will get caught by this. Now, Tears of the Kingdom does something eerily reminiscent and not at all the same. Tears of the Kingdom's version of the Lost Woods Wander is effectively you have to find your way into the depths and then to the Lost Woods through the Ascend ability. Now, I have a love-hate with this mentality. First of all, it is the first truly untraversable version of the Lost Woods, which I think is actually a good thing. This mentality that if you get lost, if you get stuck in the Lost Woods, that you will become a Stalfos, was something that was branded into my mind at a young age as a mentality that you could effectively just remain there indefinitely, stuck. And the Tears of the Kingdom version that has a truly untraversable version of the Lost Woods is actually kind of unique and kind of genius, if I'm being honest. An area that can only be reached via the depths of all locations. One of the hardest regions in all of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom to traverse to begin with. And this is done by design. Obviously, in the game where you can travel as high as you want through the skies, using flying machines, having a means that you can get to, that you can't enter the Lost Woods through traditional channels is kind of refreshing. Anywho, as you can see, we are currently entering what would be the Korok Forest segment of the Lost Woods. And this area is going to be the base of operations for the next couple of videos here. But the Korok Forest is one of those regions that is emblematic of what I think happened to the Kokiri after Link's departure in Ocarina of Time. More on that next time. But my theory on it actually revolves around a very simple ideology, which is that Link being a Hylian, the Kokiri, which are known, the Koroks, which are known for hiding very readily, very quickly, out of sight, out of mind type characters, would end up being the perfect entities to end up raising Link. Because he was somebody who was close to them, they didn't feel like they needed to hide. But an adult coming by, suddenly they disappear. It's a very unique circumstance. But while we're here, we're going to be dealing with the Fateful Stars Shrine, and that'll be it, for today at least. Now, the Fateful Stars Shrine is it's a simple shrine. On the back wall are a bunch of glyphs. Count the number of each specific type of glyph, and mark it down based on the glyph on the wall in front of me there. Theoretically, a simple wind bomb could get me through this, but I like to live dangerously. So we are going to do this the old-fashioned way. Now, knowing all of this, and knowing that I have gotten to Korok Forest, I am opting to not pick up the Master Sword yet. And there's a couple reasons why. First and foremost, this is meant to be a minimal use of weapons. And as a result of minimal use of weapons, my goal is by far and away to avoid everything. And it feels wrong. While I may need the Master Sword in the final battle, that is a possibility, I don't want to pull it prematurely. If I can beat the game without using a traditional weapon whatsoever, then that's what I'm going to do. So, while I'm sure some people out there are pained to know that I will not be touching the Master Sword today, I think it makes a lot of sense. And is part of the joy of the run. If it ever became necessary, I have access to this shrine to get it at any point in time going forward, so it's not like I'm losing out on much. Anyways, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a comment down below, and we'll catch you next time, hopefully. Until next week, I hope you all have a good one.